What is up, everyone? Thank you for joining and tuning into this video again. This one is episode number 58 with Mariana Phillips. Mariana is a New York-based visual artist and creative, the COO at The Forcing Function, co-founder and creator of Math Plus Music, which we talk about, and the creator of Weird Little Lines, which is fascinating because it exudes all of the art and houses all of the work she does for drawing, painting, artistry. But in this episode, we dive into the habits that make up a creative individual and why that is a catalyst to creating wonderful things. We talk about all of Mariana's story in depth and detail, and we hop around a lot on different topics. So enjoy this one, and let's dive into it. Episode 58 with Mariana Phillips.
I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mariana, I'll give a formal introduction because I was thinking about ways in which to introduce you, but there's so many different facets to your life that are pretty important, right? So I think they say brevity is powerful, but we'll do that for the different categories. So for one, New York City visual artist and creative. Most importantly, check out your work and website. That's a lot of it. You're also the COO at The Forcing Function with your partner, Chris Sparks, which I have questions regarding that as well.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a large part of it. And just the category of high performance for sure and creativity. And then you have a thing called Math Plus Music, which is really interesting. Can you give a one sentence summary of that? Because you would probably do a better service than me.
Absolutely. International Public Art Series that was based in New York City, but that we also did in Hong Kong, that combined math education and live musical performance.
Really just unique. I've never heard of such a thing.
Hey, it was awesome. It was such a great experience.
That's great. And then lastly, which is really cool and which will kind of open the floodgates after this, based off this question, is your first immigration Argentinian, Colombian American, correct?
Yes.
Which is really cool. Really, really cool. And I was going to say, because we talked on the phone the other week, and I know a lot of your creativity stems from listening to your father's music and probably both your mother and father and different experiences they went through. But can you discuss from a young age and also the travels you had, how that's influenced a lot of your creativity? Because there's a lot there, but even the fact that I found it so interesting that your mother or her family fled from the Holocaust when they were based in a certain area. So just all of it, I'll let you take the floor, but thank you for having an awesome bio. You're really interesting.
Thanks for that intro. I don't know what to say. There's so many different ways to go with that. We can start with my family, if that sounds good. My mom's side is they're in Argentina, they're in Buenos Aires. My dad's side is in Bogotá, in Colombia. And they left. They were living in Bogotá together, and they left in the late 80s to relocate to California after someone left a bomb near their house. This is right in the middle of a lot of terrorism activities. There was the fighting with the drug cartels, and my dad was working for the government. So it just wasn't safe. And I think it was a really great move. And I ended up being born in Palo Alto. So I'm originally from Bay Area and grew up on the East Coast and kind of in between the East Coast and Latin America. So just a big mix of everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've been the full gamut of places. I mean, if you were to list them off, Switzerland, Italy, France, Mexico, have some there, Hong Kong, all places I really want to go. Japan is something we resonated both. I haven't been there, but you have, but just an amazing place.
Oh yeah, we could have a whole conversation about loving Japan and just everything to discover, and tea. I think tea is its own its own hour-long conversation or like multi-hour conversation.
Yeah, and also I didn't realize this till recently. You grew up in, or you were around like Raleigh, North Carolina, correct? So
Yeah,
I didn't know, and I just found out David Perrell grew up around. I was
he's
gonna
from
ask.
Elon, and he's a good friend of ours.
Oh, okay. Because is there something in the water there with like how you guys make creatives? It's really interesting.
His family, if I remember correctly, is an SF, and so he went to Elon. But yeah, he did things in North Carolina, and I went to UNC, so I wasn't too far away.
Gotcha.
I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2013.
Yeah, and you studied English and political science.
Yes.
Yeah, and how did you meet him, or was it through Chris or your partner?
Yeah, I met David through Chris in New York, and I met Chris in Buenos Aires when I was with my family, and Chris was visiting friends, and I was like kind of down there visiting friends as well. And it's just, life is very random. It's really interesting how things happen and connect.
Yeah. I was gonna ask because there's certain spontaneity with creativity, but if you apply some strictness, like the constraints really can cultivate a lot of it. For you, I would love to dive in down this avenue for a sec with what constraints do you have for yourself, or like what habits allow you to foster more of that really strong creativity that you have?
Absolutely. So that's an interesting question, because I do live with and work with my partner, who is a high performance coach / trainer, educator. It's his life. It's what he loves. And so habits are really important. Daytime, like morning and evening routines, are very important to us. When it comes to creativity, I absolutely believe that constraints are imperative to me functioning creatively. I have had a lot of conversations with creatives over the last few months, over the last few years, and it's kind of a mixed bag, but generally I do see that some of the more rich conversations I've had have been with people who are self-aware of their habits, their routines, and have something built there. For me, it has a lot to do with how I wake up in the morning, making sure that I get down a to-do list. I think that we could talk about getting things done is something that comes up a lot, but having the one important thing, and usually like letting my creativity channel what that important thing is going to be in terms of art, but then allowing myself to have a set time where I'm going to be working on that. And so I think that constraints on time, I think that, making lists, and just like having my time in the morning where it's like, this is what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna sit here, and either I can like sit here and do nothing, or sit here and doodle, and eventually my doodle will become my next piece.
Yeah.
So kind of combining the two things, I think,
exactly. You said you're both like left and right brain in that regard, so that can influence it. But I've found through a lot of people I've learned from, or like self-experimentation, that it's good to get one highly disciplined thing done in the morning, like working out, and then trying to stray away from a schedule. Obviously you have scheduled things like calls and meetings and such, but just letting your mind take you wherever you want. Like this morning I've just like read for a couple hours, and I wasn't expecting to, but I was just riding that wave, which is the wave we always try to catch, that flow,
Absolutely.
So, and then
where it takes you.
Yeah, exactly. And then for Chris, I found it so interesting that, just to touch on him for a second, he is, I didn't like a high performance poker player. Was it online gambling? And then that framework and those principles he's applying to this consultancy with the Forcing Function, which is really cool.
Yeah, he is. He was for a long time one of the top 20 online poker players in the world. He's still ranked one of the best in the world. Definitely one of the most effective in terms of winning and actually winning games. I think that he would say he's not the most skilled, because skill now is based on a totally different series of like organized play that he doesn't do. It's the way he describes it. It's game optimal theory, but he is one of the most effective, and so. Yeah, I think that he also would say that it's not gambling. I would say this is not gambling. It's, gambling is like being attached to the thrill of it, versus like investing where you're making calculated risks. And so poker is a game of calculated risk and a lot of skill.
It's like rapid calculated risk.
Yes, rapid calculated expected value, I think, is just like EV all the time. So he's found ways to apply that to helping others achieve their goals in terms of becoming more high performing, living more joyful, more productive, more positive lives full of purpose. And I think that's really what drives the whole company. I think that's what the forcing function is about.
Yeah, because a company is driven by the person who creates it, so it makes so much sense of like two high caliber people as you and himself are leading this. And I've often found that COOs don't, obviously not in the spotlight as much, but they play like a massive role in creating something. So I would love for you to touch on, like, you guys just released a workbook. I would love to put it in the description as well of this episode, but like some of the routines that are helpful just for a sneak peek into the workbook itself that have really been effective for just being a high performer in general.
That's a whole I don't even know where to start with that. I do actually have the workbook right here with me.
Oh wow, okay.
But this is
that was actually totally unexpected. We did not plan that.
Not at all, not even a little bit. But I do have it here, which is always nice to flip back through.
Do you use it yourself?
I've gone through parts of it. I haven't gone through the whole thing. Chris is actually leading the inaugural cohort, which works through the workbook. Basically, it's a series of weeks, and each week is dedicated to a chapter. But I when it comes to routines, best routines, that's just so personal and so. Yeah,
well, for you, I'd love to keep it subjective then, because people can apply or take away something from you for themselves, and maybe there's going to be like meta themes that intersect. But you can expand on that for sure.
Absolutely. I think exercise being part of my routine is huge. So I work out twice a week, do yoga twice a week. And that has not always been the case. I do not consider myself athletic. I am very arts oriented, but I think that including exercise in my routine has been hugely beneficial. I think going on walks in the afternoons is really good too for energy, especially if I'm feeling lethargic, if I'm feeling like I'm stuck. I think it's moving your body is one of the easiest ways to get unstuck, which is easy advice to give and I think harder to take. But when I do it, it really works. So I'd say physical activity as part of a routine is just like always a win-win.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, that's why I really try to try to abide by working out in the morning. Sometimes I think I've realized that just going to bed on time is going to allow me to do that. So it's like, what things should I not do in order to do those other things really well?
Yep.
Yeah. But
sorry. I had another really important routine.
Absolutely.
Sleep routines changes everything.
There you go.
So it's not just the routine, it's all the habits around sleep and having dedicated like QA, I guess, for your sleep, which I'll say for me is super important. If I don't get at least 8 hours, I just don't function well. I become a robot. But making sure you're in a dark room, making sure that you've got an alarm set, the phone isn't by your bed, keeping electronics out of the way, doing something like some wind down routine before you get in bed. You can incorporate like nice smells like lavender. You can be using a white noise machine if you live somewhere. Like when we lived in the city, that was a really big help. Blackout curtains, eye masks, checking your mattress, cooling pads, all these like gadgets and things. I just think that it fits into figuring out what your routine is for sleep. And that is just like that night and day difference if you're paying attention to that.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because as I was looking into some of the stuff with forcing function, I was super intrigued by the links you guys have for resources. I can attach those as well, but there's a ton, and I'm guessing it's from personalization because you guys use all of these different sleep devices.
Oh, yep. So all the products in the products we love section are things that Chris has personally tested. All of that has been part of the last few years of testing, and it really has changed just like so much in terms of quality.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have to do it all yourself now. You can just look at it and say, hey, like I should try this or try this depending what my trouble is. Just troubleshoot yourself.
Yeah, and that's investing in yourself, like stuff you really can't see tangibly until a little bit later down the line. Like you think, why spend X amount on all this sleeping material? But it'll pay off in the long term, as it's shown for people like you and Chris and others who are in the cohort you have or the community you're building.
Absolutely.
But talking more about, so we went through like the guardrails of like making creativity flourish. But like
Uh-huh.
for you, can you talk about your actual work and the stuff you're working on with Weird Little Lines and what you're hoping to make with that, different projects you have coming up that you want to focus on?
Absolutely. I'm tackling a few different themes. I think creativity keeps coming up, so that for me is something where I am trying to not censor myself and just create what comes to mind, letting my imagination flow wild and just see
Mm.
where that takes me. But at the same time, I do have this interest in science in a very grounded space where there's all this research, all this reading, all this really great writing, and finding a way to connect those systems and create something that's both educational and joyful, and that hopefully helps people learn and maybe be inspired to study it themselves. I think that a lot of these subjects, a lot of education, has a tendency to become intimidating. Just the way that it's written, the way it's presented in papers, in classes, and I don't think it should be like that. I think that there should be joy in this, and I think that by creating art that holds that, maybe it'll get people to feel that too and take the dive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It exudes through the work for sure. And I had this one point come up last week because I always just work in themes, and
Hmm.
when I really understand something, I really like start to feel it. And then they say, once you start to feel it, you become it. But people like LeBron James, Serena Williams, just even people in the creative realm as yourself or artists, like there's so much prep that goes into stuff and so much deep research. But then when you get out to performing, it's just like, let me abandon all of that and just let my intuition guide. And when I talked to you the other day, you were listening to quantum physics or quantum mechanics lecture while listening to classical music. I just found it really cool that that theme applies to just everything and everyone, and that it's been kind of in my perception of things lately.
Yeah, I do think that there's the component where a lot of research starts at the beginning. For me, all that solidifies in my head. I don't really do drafts. I don't really do sketches. But there is a lot in the back end that happens before my pen hits the page. Um,
And
yeah,
would you want to talk about that too? Because I didn't like that, and then in the science background, because that definitely plays a role as like science, sort of the backbone to all this really creative work you do.
yeah. Well, so for instance, the one that comes to mind is astronomy. I love astronomy. I remember I took classes in that, and I still study it for myself for fun. And I have favorite star shapes, favorite things that happen in the cosmos. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to work on next a few months ago, like I was thinking, oh, like maybe I should do a chart of something or the next, like an explanatory shape of something. And I thought, oh, I should do a pulsar because I love pulsars. And this is something where I have been reading about this and I know about this, but I never considered, oh, I should just like create this and make this in the style and make it just like, I don't know, like a fun version of this
Yeah,
because
and what's a pulsar? Just for
it's a neutron star. So it's a neutron star, and it has a pulsing beam of radiation, and that's how we see them, or the way we hear them when we receive it on Earth. So you can listen to pulsars. Actually, that would be really fun to find a link of. But if you pull it up on the internet, you can Google like pulsar sounds, and it's called a pulsar because that pulsating beam transmits like a frequency at a constant rate, and depending the age of the pulsar depends how fast or how slow that pulse is. But they're just incredible. It's something that you could read a ton into, and yeah, I ended up drawing that, and that for me, I want to make more.
yeah.
That's an example of research hitting art, where this is something that I read about and talked about a lot, and then finally like, oh, I should do that, and then I did it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's something like that idea or that practice is I've recently read Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson, and he sort of
Mhm.
did that similar thing where he like a lot of the beauty of what we create as humans, there's a overlapping thing of science and art. And like
Mm.
Leonardo da Vinci was big on science, math, physics, like all this stuff, really enjoyed nature, but then he just constantly iterated on these spirals and these different spirals within his work and these sketches. And then obviously the Mona Lisa came about, which is just like his holy grail of all the repetition prior to that, which I just find so interesting. But for you, like, are there individuals you look to or learn from, whether it be living now or in the past, through books or videos? What's that for you?
That's a long list as well. I remember being asked this question recently, and it's just, yeah, I really admire Frida Kahlo's work. There's physicists like Richard Feynman, there's writers like Roald Dahl and their illustrations. I don't know, like there's music that inspires me. I think inspiration just hits so many different levers, where it's music, art, science, technology, philosophy. But I wanted to say something about what you mentioned with the Renaissance. I do think that being inside, being in isolation because of COVID during quarantine did have an accelerating effect on, like, I guess, the cycle of creativity for me. And I do believe that there is this Renaissance coming post-COVID or post this time, where there will be a flourishing of a lot of things, but I think specifically in the arts. And so I do think that a lot of this connects to Renaissance, but I do believe that the Renaissance is also like on its way because of the times that we're in.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I don't know what question to pose for you to expand on that more, but I would love for you to dive in deeper on that, because it's like you can definitely feel that wave within just the human race in general.
Yeah, I think so. It's a creative renaissance, and I think it has something to do with people realigning to maybe their core values, realigning to what they really want to be doing. I think that more time has been created because a lot of people were spending a lot of time commuting. I also think that there's been just a giant flux in everything, where people have lost jobs. People are like, there's a lot of instability. And because of the instability, there's this pressure that's created. And I do think that that has an effect in the arts, that has an effect on where the creative mind goes. At least for me, the stress or like the compounded anxiety of not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing where things are going, was useful. Channeling it through art, it was definitely like a propellant in creating things, where for a couple weeks there, it felt like my energy was just tripled with like what I had to put on paper. And yeah, I'm not sure that I have any particular insight into what the creative renaissance will look like. I think that in New York, one could speak to the fact that rental prices should go down. A lot of artists have been priced out of Manhattan and then pushed out to the edges of Brooklyn and Bushwick, and that even those have become expensive. And so that post this period, hopefully there's a return to more reasonable rates, making things more accessible to people who are in the creative spaces. And then those people get to create better work and create new work and have better conditions to create work, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I think of when I think of creative renaissance.
No, that makes complete sense. And you can definitely visualize that. And one of the things I would love to piggyback off of that is the importance of that environment. Could you talk about high performance people, creativity, constraints and guardrails to really let it bloom? The environment's crucial. In New York and, Austin, Texas, and maybe some places in Florida, even Philadelphia, as where I was for a couple of years, those are like the hubs. So was that a reason you wanted to stay located in New York, or was there something else?
We wanted to be in New York because we love New York. At the time, I had a job that I moved to New York from Buenos Aires. So I was working in a tech company. But yeah, Chris had his whole like life and a bunch of friends in New York, and I'd always wanted to live in New York. It felt like a center for the arts. So I guess, yeah, in some way, being in the middle of arts and culture was really important. And
I told you that.
Yeah. And right now we've left New York for a little bit. We've had some family obligations and some priorities have shifted in a good way, I think. And I miss it so much. But at the same time, I know that where I am is the right place to be. I'm in North Carolina again. But we'll be traveling soon, and I can't wait to be back. And all my stuff is there in storage. So
yeah.
It'll happen sooner than later.
Gives you a reason. But yeah, definitely a place to call home. For your own reasons.
And Yeah, it does feel like home. I think New York feels like home to a lot of people.
Yeah. And then were you going to say something? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, no, just thinking more creatively in what New York means, but yeah, it's like the energy there. There's a rush, there's like a momentum, and you can feed on that.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of people are leaving, like not, I mean, for maybe reasons similar to yours with family obligations, but just in general. Um, I think there's always a thing where people live in cities for one generation and leave a city for another and then come back. But like you said, pandemic has kind of accelerated people leaving for their own reasons. I know a lot of people who've just left to get houses in the wilderness to be around work-oriented friends. So
Yeah, yeah, I think it's definitely shifted priorities, and maybe some of the reasons people were staying in a city. We could talk about the future of work, but that's a big one. I mean, if you don't have to be going into an office, do you have to live, a couple blocks away from it? Do you have to live off the subway for it? Can't you just go and be somewhere with more space? Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff shifting. That's breaking into that.
yeah, for sure. And before, because I would love to dive into that and future aspirations with your work, but
Hmm.
there's this one thing, this quote I wanted to read off here that I wrote, and then a question for you pertaining to math and music and what you do. Because, like I said, I found it really interesting. But Einstein has a quote, and I know you'd appreciate this: "Is math is the language nature uses to describe her wonders."
Mm.
So, for you, with the inner workings of math and music, how do you visualize that for people to comprehend? Because you said you make music and you visualize it like basically mathematically, and maybe I'm not even getting it because I don't fully understand, but I would love for.
Oh, I can re-explain. Yeah, let me explain again. So I co-founded Math Plus Music with friends, one of which is Marcus. He's a saxophonist and mathematician, um, and he would perform with his band and discuss math concepts that related to that. So we had different themes per event. So we had an event that was symmetry, we had an event that was probability,
uh,
and music and the presentation went along with this theme and basically like illustrated mathematical concepts in a really friendly, approachable way that was, accessible to kids, accessible to adults, and basically like made it warm and friendly and inviting. So I love that quote. I love that quote by Einstein. I think that the really intriguing thing about combining music and math, or just combining math in general with anything in the world, is that math is like the basic language for everything that exists. And for that reason, if anything, it's just so incredibly important to have a relationship with it. And so many people are scared away from it in high school and middle school from teachers who either didn't know how to reach the student, or maybe weren't the best teacher. And a lot of people grow up with a ton of trauma around mathematics and feel that they're bad at math, when really math is the basis of everything. And if you love music, if you love art, which a lot of people connect with, I think this is something that's very accessible, then you realize like, oh, this thing that I love, the basis of it sits in this other thing which I've been scared by, but I shouldn't be, because all of this is interconnected. And so even though I'm not currently working on Math Plus Music, that series ended last year, I still find it so important to explore interconnected themes in everything that I do. And that translates to the arts and the science, how the arts connect to the sciences, and everything else. I really believe that that's where we find the interesting stuff. That's where we get the good stuff, looking in those places.
yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the point of being straight away from math at a young age, because my question was going to be, what's your advice for those who are in that category, and how to reinvigorate this interest for such a basic thing that is so important?
Now there's a really interesting answer, which is online education. And I know that sounds simple, but hear me out. There is this wave happening, which I'm sure you're aware of, where everything and anything has become accessible online. And I think also accelerated because of COVID, suddenly everyone's getting online and teaching things, and a lot of them are teaching for free. And so now suddenly you have access to all these incredible teachers who are teaching in all sorts of interesting ways, and it's at your fingertips. And I think that taking advantage of that is one of the first things that I would do if someone said, I'm scared of, re-dipping my feet into this, but I'd like to get back into it. It's like, well, there's all sorts of stuff available online. And you no longer have to be going to a top university to sit and to hear from some of the best teachers in the world. And that changes everything.
Yeah, and even Yale, I heard it, and other Ivy Leagues are offering free courses, which is phenomenal. And it's
Yep, and there's a ton of online courses like EDX, Coursera. I mean, there's a whole list of them.
Yeah, YouTube you can label its own.
YouTube is its own, and I think this all started with YouTube. I mean, YouTube has been doing this forever, but it's really picked up in the last 6 months, and I hope it just continues. But part of it is having the access to really great teachers and to people who are inspired by the work and can inspire others, and maybe make it more entertaining, make it more fun.
Yeah, and what we talked about last time, off recording, just over a call last week, one of your things is obviously you want to be a mentor. And I have a lot of people always say to me, not like in a question form, but just expressing how they want to dream and live. They say they want to create impact. But this realization came this week where I was like, you can do that right now. Just put out content. And it's all decentralized. So for you, it's like you might not label yourself that now, but you're doing it ongoingly with your work, with your art, with your writing, with your interviews, everything you have with your website. So just a point, maybe not so a question for you, but just something I found interesting if you can relate at all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think I'm still way too early in everything to call myself a mentor, but that's the hope. And listen, that can take a whole lifetime. I'm fine spending my whole life working towards that.
Ongoing iteration.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask before, with this concept of bigger thinking with math and physics, like quantum mechanics and all of that, in which some people can't really comprehend. Does that give you a sense of gratitude, or can you talk to the point of how it makes you look at yourself as a small little piece in the grand scheme of things? Because I find it that, not that you're a scientist, in a way you are, but scientists have this like view that others can't, and maybe it allows them to have this practicality to things because they see themselves as so granular in this grand scheme.
Absolutely. I'm not a scientist. I did grow up around scientists. I love science. And maybe someday I will be a scientist. But I really do believe that studying the building blocks of the world, studying why the world works the way it does, puts us in our place as far as remembering how small we are compared to everything else in the universe. It's so incredibly important. It just puts all your problems into perspective. I love studying philosophy and science for that reason. There's so many great quotes. I'm thinking of like, I want to pull one up right now. Just to be able to say one, but yeah, like there's Werner Heisenberg, and there's just all sorts that the reality we can put into words is never reality itself, and that's the truth.
Wait, say it once more.
The reality we can put into words is never reality itself, and that's a quote. And I think that's the absolute truth. Where the more we study, the more we realize what we don't know, and that's the real key to
uncontrollability.
Yeah, what we don't know, how small we are, and maybe how we fit into the scheme of things. But really, just the more we see of how the world works, the more we realize, like, well, we're not that big of a piece of it.
Yeah.
And that should provide relief. That should provide relief. That should humble us.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so happy you brought that up too, because I've been listening and reading of Naval Ravikant, and he talks about this thing, like his thesis on happiness or gratitude is like accepting death. And what you pointed to is exactly that. It's like, it's so amazing. This formula of life has this ongoing nature to it that it causes us to just bang our head against the wall to try to learn something, and then we break through, there's another one right there. So it's kind of like that beautiful, that failure creates progress and growth.
Yeah, and I don't believe in failure. I do think that getting better at something means you start interacting with more interesting problems. You just keep making more interesting mistakes, keep meeting more interesting problems, and as you progress, that just continues and it gets harder.
Yeah,
But
so it's like there's problems all around us, but only when you're ready can you like take on more or certain things.
I do believe that we face what we're ready for.
Exactly.
Hmm.
I love that. I love that a lot. I know Amanda, your friend, we talked about Destiny before.
Amanda, you rock.
Which she'll be on in one of the episodes soon. But to that point, it's like Destiny and like what it's kind of like Destiny, but not as well, because your daily decisions and your perception create your destiny. So it's like how, I guess it just boils down to whatever people look at it subjectively as, but it comes down to just that same lesson for all.
Yeah, destiny is interesting. Destiny, like we're predestined to end up somewhere. Yeah, I'm pretty skeptical of anything having to do with like linear movement forward. I don't time doesn't do that really. We just perceive it doing that, and in some ways, I do believe in fate. There have been a lot of fateful things that have happened in my life, but there's still so much mystery. So who can really say?
Yeah, for what's to come, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers to that, and for what's to come as well. I'm glad this flowed in that way. What are you excited to aspire to achieve with your creative work? I know a child book was one that was top of mind.
Yeah, children's book would be high on the list.
But yeah, if I would love to open the floor for you to talk about aspirations.
Yeah, right now I'm just trying to work on a body of work and create work that feels authentic and not push myself to be producing for producing's sake. But I would like longer term to be doing work that is accessible. So to start to kids. So for kids education, there's so many ways that could go, and I don't even want to go down that list because that's a long, long list. But I think making topics and conversations that might be difficult into lighter, funner versions could be really great. I would love to be working on more experiential productions with artist friends around global climate change, around the themes of today, around pieces that are important to us, around my Latinx identity, around Latin America, Argentina, Colombia, and celebrating that. I just see so many different ways that I want to make work, and I feel like a lot of the things that I like to make are tactile, and I want people to interact with them and touch them and like be with them and learn from that. And so yeah, I think those are the two big ones for me. I think it's books. It always comes back to books and spaces. And right now I just feel so lucky that I get to be creating what I'm creating. It feels like a blessing.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I think to the one thing you mentioned, we'll have another quote here, as the quotes can endlessly be applied. Robert Pirsig, he said, "You want to know how to paint a perfect painting? It's easy. Make yourself perfect and then just paint naturally. That's the way all experts do it." So yeah, embody it in a way. Embody it to show it to the world.
Embody the ideas and then just release out what comes. Yeah, I like that. So this fits into personal development. The more you work on yourself, the greater your creative output. Let's get that out to all the creators.
Exactly. That's why for such a long time, especially when I was younger, people would look at self-improvement or me focusing on it as this odd thing. But I always just saw it as it will help me help others. It wasn't just like this aura of self-improvement in this very generic wave that it's like kind of like mindfulness coming now. It's like you don't really have to know the concept. It's not just like a trend that happens.
Yep, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. There's bombs being dropped everywhere in this episode. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I think working on ourselves is the most important thing we can do to help our friends, to help everyone.
Yeah, and for some people on like the Twitterverse or the internet or social media, would you recommend for those listening, like anyone they should go to? Because I know it's all subjective. Uh,
Follow Chris Sparks on Twitter at Sparks Remarks. I don't tweet; he tweets. His tweets are really good.
oh, what is it?
It's
What's
at Sparks Remarks.
okay? Spell that out for us real quick.
SPARKS REMARKS.
Yeah, okay. I'll put in the description. But
Okay.
does he just put out quotes? Like, what's the meaning behind?
Oh, he puts out all sorts of things. This is Chris, but
Chris does it.
yeah. But he just constantly just drops bombs on Twitter. So
I see. Harsh
you
remarks.
should go follow him. Yeah, I'm not active on Twitter. I try to stay away from social media except for the stuff I have to do. I do use Instagram, but yeah, I'd
Very
say
visible, makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, I don't have to be on anything else. But follow him on Twitter. Who else? There's definitely a small list. Do you have anyone to recommend that you think would be something that I should check out?
I would say, I mean, you know of David. He does a great job with writing. There's what's his name? Jack Butcher does a great job with visualize value, which actually you would like. It's a lot about visualizing concepts for people to understand. And right now he's using quotes to visualize it in black and white type format. I can send you that. And then obviously Naval and Ray Dalio. Those are two people I really enjoy.
I thought of a few more for Twitter.
Yes.
For personal productivity, for improved performance. Tiago Forte, should be Forte Labs. He's great. He's also a friend. You said David. Spencer Greenberg is that incredible. I haven't actually checked out his Twitter, but I have him on Facebook. He's also a friend, but he's just like very rational, very insightful, very interesting way of viewing the world. I'll think of a few more and send them to you afterwards, because that's like I need to like check through and just the moment I actually look at it, I'll remember another.
Those are golden. Those are great. Yeah. In general, I think the one thing I would ask to cap this off or just leave the door open for you to talk about things is, one, what has been a bigger realization you've had, or something a realization that's then caused you to change the way you view things this year? Because this year has definitely humbled, as you said, has brought us back to our roots and our core and the values we want to embody. So for you, since it's brought you back to that place, what have you then been able to redirect your view on and learn about?
That's a good question. Yeah, this has been a really weird year.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been a really strange year. I feel like I've surprised myself this year, and other people have as well. I think that being kind to ourselves is a theme that echoes for this year, but also years past and for the future. Being kind to ourselves when things are hard, being kind to ourselves when we're not performing at our best, when things aren't easy. Man.
Yeah,
there's so many ways to go with that. It's hard. It's just, I just think that keeping in mind that, you can always make a plan, but that you have to be ready to be flexible. A lot of people's plans have been thrown to the wind this year, thought they'd be somewhere else at this point. And I think that, just keeping flexibility in mind, keeping kindness in mind. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's potent, because there's something I saw a while ago that said you have to be strict in your approach, but like strict in your decision, but agile in your approach. So it's like set in your ways, but then, like you said, it's I mean, all of this episode can be like boiled down into a couple words or sentences of this uncontrollability and like letting and surrendering to that, and this
surrender to chaos.
Surrender to chaos. Yeah. You had something around that theme, right? I feel like I saw one of your works, or Maybe it was an interview.
Probably, but I can't think of. Yeah, I'm sure I've written something about that.
You probably created something out of that theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, like chaos. And then you find yourself within the storm. It's like rising above the hurricane, going outside yourself, but in like a reality type sense.
Yeah, change is always going to happen, but what matters is how we adapt.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I think that's there's a lot of things that some can take away. Hopefully one more than the other or multiple. But if there's anything else you would like to end a note on or say top of mind as of recently, I appreciate having you on. And
absolutely. I love this conversation. I feel like we just had to jump through a bunch of different subjects. There's so much to talk about, so maybe we'll have to do another. But I just say that, yeah, if anyone wants to check out work, it's on Instagram at Weird Little Lines. My website is marianaphillips.com. You should absolutely download the workbook at theforceyourfunction.com/workbook. It's for free if you get the ebook.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we have the book priced priced at cost on Amazon if you want to buy it. It's just so you have a physical copy. But yeah, it was just such a pleasure to talk with you and talk about these things, and it brings me so much joy. And it's just really awesome to be able to talk about it.
I appreciate that. So much gratitude for you, and I'll make sure all those links go in there. And then, as you said, there can be an amazing part 2 in a more focused manner on some specific things. But nonetheless, there's a lot of potency to the points that were made, and just having you on is great. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.